It is that time again. Episode 32. Everybody's favorite show with their 3 favorite bad motherfuckers. How's it going, Thomas?
Pretty good. Everything's okay. No major complaints. I hope you guys are okay too. And I'm really excited about tonight's show. 32. The next one, I should dress up as a Freemason or something like that for it.
Yes, all of us.
I'm doing
monocles and everything.
There's 3 of us.
Yeah, and there's 3 of us. Yeah.
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 Can everybody see the thing above Timothy's head right now that says the Week in Strange? Making sure our OBS is working right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's in the right place. Yep.
Some kind of glitch earlier. I don't know why that happened, but good to see you, Thomas. Good to see you, Timothy. And thank you, everybody, for showing up here on Facebook and the Facebook chat for our live stream. Yeah, let's go ahead and get this bad boy rolling.
All right. Okay. Signs of significant brain rewiring have been found in space travelers. There's still lots to explore and learn about the effects that space travel has on the body, and it seems those affected include some neuron rewiring that goes on in the brain. Researchers studying the brains of 12 cosmonauts found what they describe as significant microstructural changes in the white matter that manages communications within the brain and to and from the rest of the body. The data were obtained through diffusion magnetic resonance imaging, DMRI, scans taken just before and right after the time participants spent in space, which lasted an average of 172 days. Further scans were carried out 7 months later, and while there was a reversal of some changes, a few of them were still visible. Specifically, the team found changes in neural tracts related to sensory and motor functions and speculate this could have something to do with the cosmonauts' adaptation to life in microgravity. Considering the different physics and kinesthetics applying to the extreme environment of space and the hypothesis that these have significant effects on the brain's representation and control of the body, these tracts are therefore suspected to reflect this altered sensory motor function shown in space travelers. This is the first time a brain imaging technique known as fiber tractography has been used in relation to the effects of spaceflight. The technique builds up a 3D picture of neuron tracts, revealing the brain's wiring scheme. While changes in the brain of space travelers have been observed before by using fiber tractography, this study was able to take a better look at the actual connections between neurons and how they shifted. Initially, the researchers thought they'd spotted changes in the corpus callosum, the central highway connecting both hemispheres of the brain. But on closer analysis, they were seeing an expansion of the brain's ventricles, a communicating network of chambers filled with fluid that sit next to the corpus callosum. The structural changes were initially found in the corpus callosum are actually caused by the dilation of the ventricles that induce anatomical shifts of the adjacent neural tissues. Where initially it was thought that there are only real structural changes in the brain, we only observe shape changes. This puts the findings in a different perspective. Changing in the wiring of the brain aren't unusual, of course. This plasticity enables us to learn new skills, make new memories, and so much more. At the moment, it's not clear exactly what the implications of this space-related rewiring might be. What's certain is that our bodies do try to adapt to the harsh environment in space. Previous studies have shown signs of increased risk of disease and potential ways the brain could get damaged. It also appears that spending time in space affects men and women differently. It's early days for the study of this particular brain adaptation using this particular scanning technique, but the more we know about human bodies in zero gravity, the better we'll be able to prepare for journeying to other worlds. These findings give us additional pieces of the entire puzzle. Since this research is so pioneering, we don't know how the whole puzzle will look yet. These results contribute to our overall understanding of what's going on in the brains of space travelers. It is crucial to maintain this line of research, looking for spaceflight-induced brain changes from different perspectives and using different techniques. Vindicated, Thomas.
Well, you both know that this subject is right up my street, mainly because I was a very disappointed schoolboy. And when I was a little boy, I was all excited, believing all the stuff that humans were going to go and conquer the stars, and they were going to, breed on the spaceships and have babies and future generations. And it was all so wonderfully science fiction and everything. And then it dawned on me as I became more knowledgeable that this would never happen, that we're being lied to. There's absolutely, I'm going to make a prediction. Not only will humans never do interstellar travel, they'll never do interplanetary travel inside this current body. There may be other ways, but they won't do it in this physiology. We are bonded to Gaia. We are so bonded to Gaia that, like, for instance, the whole idea of people breeding as they travel through to the stars, so they send men and women on a spaceship. The problem was that women's menstrual cycles are totally regulated by our sun and by our moon. And therefore, if you move away from them, they simply won't have fertility. They still won't have a cycle. So that one was thrown out of the water. But also, all you have to do is look at the Apollo astronauts. They only got as far as the moon, which is practically just over there. It's not that far away, 200,000 miles or so, right? And they all came back messed up. How can you account for guys who were hard drinking, womanizing military Top Gun pilots? When they come back from the moon, they're in an ashram in India, or they're in a bar drinking themselves to death. It affected them so deeply that just the day and a half they spent up there on the moon's surface. You can't do it. You just can't do it. And for lots of reasons. And the changes in the body thing, the same thing with these space stations. You know what those guys do most of the time up there? Is they exercise to stop their arteries from clogging up and things like that. It's not easy. Space travel is incredibly difficult. Interplanetary travel is nigh impossible. So when you hear like the likes of Elon Musk going on about we're going to have colonies on Mars and so on, we're not going to have them in these bodies. Not going to happen. It will never happen. Now, that's nonsense. Now, one way we could go is possibly, this could be even how humans came here from Mars or somewhere else, is a kind of a dream adaptation. We're going into sort of very deep mysticism stuff here, but the idea that the consciousness could be transferred onto a species. So for instance, you are on Mars, say, or some other planet or some other galaxy, in a distant galaxy, and your planet was dying, and you found this planet called Earth that had proto-humanoid monkeys on it. If you could somehow transfer your consciousness into those proto-humanoid monkeys, then you have the beginnings of the Homo sapiens and survival of your species. This might account for the sudden and rapid change in human development. Maybe they even went to the early proto-humans, and suddenly we had Egypt and Atlantis and all these other places popping up out of nowhere. Ready-made consciousness in a new body. Who knows? We don't know. We'll probably never know. But I think that's the only way it's possible. I'm delighted this story comes out, and people should be talking about this more, because space travel in terms of human beings is the biggest dud going. And that's half the reason I think that this whole thing is cultivated, the moon landing hoax, is so they don't want people to believe. They want people to always know it's never possible. And it's not a waste of money. It's literally can't be done. It's too dangerous on the neurology and stuff like that and the body. And that's what better way to cultivate this anti-space travel thing and think it's something like a moon landing hoax. They did go to the moon, by the way, and they came back messed up. So, thank you, Timony. That's a very exciting story, and I'm glad you picked that one because that's right up my street.
Yeah, and just that whole idea of another human species being created on another planet. It would have to be, if there were to be humans living on Mars again, I would imagine would have to dig up some sort of the DNA of the previous occupants of that planet in order to do something like that. And that would take some serious genetic engineering to do that. Or I wonder too, if perhaps it is when a couple goes and gets pregnant on Mars, if the epigenetics, is that the right term, where things with it, like the vestigial legs on a snake, when they come back into play, like if there's some sort of environmental phenomenon that when those people become bonded or bound to Mars, the entity of Mars, if something like that could occur. But I would imagine, again, this is kind of like Moonchild kind of stuff here, where we're talking about bringing an earthly being into a Martian body. Again, it's difficult. And again, like you're saying, that this is going heavily into mysticism and deep mysticism here. But I would imagine it would take some experimentation. And if people are going to do this, it's like, you've talked about before, all these people doing the Mars One mission and all this, they're sacrificing themselves. And it seems like, again, if Elon Musk and company like that were trying to do this, they're not the right folks. You need Jack Parsons types. Again, you need people who are, into the magic of it. Yeah. You need astronauts who are a little more, like you're talking about, beer guzzling, womanizing, spacemen. You need real rough and tumble kind of guys doing these kind of programs, not a bunch of little bitch men that are doing the technology, the tech industry kind of stuff right now. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, like
But just
the NASA Apollo astronauts were, most of them are Korean veterans, fighter pilot veterans. Those guys had been in battle and combat and shot guys out of the sky and everything. They tested like experimental aircraft where your chances of being killed were very, very high. And yet they came back messed up. Now, they were a different generation. You know, I had the right stuff, just like the movie said. I couldn't imagine the soy boys you'd have today being sent up there like that. They'd fall apart.
right.
You know, they'd fall apart. Now, you said about like almost an element of wizardry is needed to get to the stars and the planets. That's absolutely true. I mean, you know, to take it back to fiction again, but you know, because we this is what we do in The Weak and Strange. You think of Tolkien, like I think it was the beginning of the Second Age or the Third Age, where the elves left Middle Earth and went to the Undying Lands from the Grey Havens. Now, and also Bilbo and Frodo went with them. Now, they were transformed into a different kind of spirit. It was almost like, it wasn't that the elven bodies went, or Frodo's and Bilbo's bodies went. It was almost like they died. It was death. And that spirit continued to the Undying Lands. And I think even Tolkien was right on the money then. You know, the whole thing that, you know, they're trying to get to this off-world reality will require some kind of death of the body, but only the survival of the spirit. So definitely, you know, this is what makes space travel so exciting to me. It's kind of like outer space, interstellar wizardry. And things like remote viewing could have a huge role to play in this.
Right. Astral projection onto another planet, you know, being able to astrally travel to another planet. And going back to that, it's like, you know, the end of 2001, A Space Odyssey, when they've got the Star Child, and you were just talking about the transformation of the being. It's like, I forgot the character's name, but when he goes into that bedroom scenario at the end of the film, and he's transferred into a new form of beingness. He's no longer the man that we knew at the beginning of the film. He's an entirely different being. And then, you know, there's the Star Child after that. And it's like, yeah, there has to be a transmutation of one form of human being, a terrestrial human being, into a Martian human being, you know, or wherever, you know, lunar or, you know, Venusian, in order to be bonded to that planet. But yeah, it's got to take some sort of sorcery. It's got to take some sort of wizardry. It's not the dichotomy,
the sort of conflict between the technological version of that and the spiritual version of that is shown early on in the film. Hal is extremely interested in Dave. Even you know, right earlier on, he's very not when he's that's why he wants to play chess with him all the time, because he sort of knows that Dave has something that Hal, the robot mind, would never have. And that's why when he takes a real interest in Dave's artwork, when he's sketching the inside of the spaceship, and he says, "Can I see your new drawings, Dave?" Oh, they're very interesting. You know, like Hal had already kind of not predicted, but sussed out that Dave was the Star Child, but Hal wanted to be the Star Child. So that film was so interesting on lots of levels. So yeah, that was the dichotomy, the dualism between the Hal representing the mechanical approach to space travel and Dave's personal and spiritual transformation representing how the only way it can be done.
With that too, Thomas, do you think, you know, Thomas and Timothy, do you think it's possible that Jack and Ron did create some sort of moonchild, a homunculus of some sort that I don't know if that all went underground, or if back then, if, you know, I know they did a lot. They were doing some Enochian shit, and they were blasting through veils of reality. But I do wonder, you know, Crowley's Moonchild, I know that was kind of a recipe for a lot of what they did with the Babylon working. But again, creating a Moonchild, were they effectively able to create a lunar being in human form, or a human form that could go to the moon? And perhaps that was what took Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and company, you know, some the not a tulpa, but like the egregore of the Moonchild is what took mankind to the moon. So maybe not an actual Moonchild, but yeah. So I think I just answered my own question.
Well, yeah, well, I think the reason why the Apollo missions got to the moon was the same reason they could build the pyramids and can't do both now. It was the expression of spirit science. There was a spiritual approach to that science. That's why it was loaded with Freemasons. I know the conspiratorial people are all over the place saying, "Oh, that means it's evil." No, it just means they've had a different attitude to it. And remember, von Braun and the German ones came over. They would have been all early members of the armament societies, and the Teutonic magical thing would have been very big within them. They knew there was something deeper and richer. The fact that von Braun survived the war and got over and became the boss of NASA. Just imagine that. I mean, this is the guy who was building rockets to fire them at London. And within 5 years, he's the big shot rocket guy in America. Now, you don't get forgiven that easily. You don't. That's some kind of level of magical charisma that he had that actually made him the boss of NASA. And it wasn't just because he was a rocket guy. It was something else. And we know that him and Parsons in the early days were fascinated by science fiction. Obviously, that's what bonded them together. In my wildest fantasy, right? Now, I'm not saying this is a fact, right? My wildest fantasy is that Hubbard and Parsons escaped the planet. And they're off into interstellar space. And I'll tell you, because they both died. Parsons, literally, and Hubbard possibly replaced. And both of them could have actually made it. You know, like the song by the Doors, Break On Through to the Other Side. They could have done it. There was even some I reading John Dee's biography recently, and there was even some hints that they were kind of obsessed with this idea of breaking free of the mortal realms of the earth, and it comes in earthly realms. So hey, Dee, Kelly, Parsons, Hubbard. It takes two to actually tango in outer space.
That's right. And then they also had Crowley had passed away, in 47 or 49?
Yeah.
Crossed over the abyss. Yeah.
And I mean, he was kind of he was a bit on the bitter side of the whole thing, because I think the real reason he was he was writing letters to McMurtry saying that Parsons and Hubbard are nut jobs, is because they were daring to go where he was probably saying, I'm too old, I'm too sick, and I wish I was there with them.
Yeah, and I would imagine there'd be some misdirect there too, because in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, and some people might hate me for this, but I think McMurtry was the infiltrator within that group.
It's an easy thing to pin on him. There's no doubting that he was a spiritual individual. There's no doubting that he did the work that, he was, his work into yoga and stuff like that is outstanding. But there's a lot of weird stuff goes on around McMurtry and his connection to there. And, I'm not going to find a dead man guilty, but there was something not right there. He was too much of an interloper on both sides. He reminds me of the type that plays two sides off against each other for his own personal
double agent.
Yeah. Was it his own personal benefit, or was it for someone else? That's a $6 million question.
Right. And just the concept of him becoming Hymenaeus Alpha 777 is just it's a little too perfect. But again, yeah, this is my opinion, and I can shove it where it belongs. But
yep. We're not finding a dead man guilty or innocent. Do it, just speculating.
Right. Just my opinion. Yeah. But no, this is just fascinating to know that this whole story here about human consciousness not working in space, and there's something to it. They're talking about this from an incredibly physiological standpoint. And yes, I'm sure there is a physiological standpoint or a physiological aspect that we can bring into this about the way that it rewires the brain, but it goes deeper than that. But there's just like that other brain article you posted the other day. It's like, yes, science is just, sometimes they discover a little bit of magic and call it science.
That's what Crowley said. Yep. And he's right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
No, that was really good. All right. Good job on that. That was good. Hold on. More technical difficulties. God damn it. Oh wait, no, I got it. Okay.
So this one's going to tie nicely into what we were just talking about. There's a string of these three that will go really nicely together.
Ancient spines threaded onto sticks found in Peru. The strange burial practice was discovered in the Chincha Valley at the Pacific coast of Peru. Researchers working in Peru have unearthed 192 human spines that were ceremonially threaded onto posts made of reeds 500 years ago. The discovery, published in the journal Antiquity, highlights an Andean burial tradition that has only been found in this specific area of Western Peru, which is known as the Chincha Valley. Teams of archaeologists excavated 20 sites around the region and found the spines in elaborate graves known as chulpas. The fact that these vertebrae on posts were discovered at multiple sites may suggest this was a common and well-known practice. It is thought the spines were reconstructed and held together with reeds many years after death, possibly due to the graves being looted and damaged by European settlers. The dead being buried intact was an important part of the culture of the Chincha people, so their reconstruction and reinterment would have been highly significant. This coastal region was once the heartland of the Chincha kingdom, but between 1533 and 1583, its population declined massively due to epidemics, famines, and the arrival of foreign invaders. Yep, that's it.
So immediately, Thomas, I think what I wanted to pitch to you about this one that I think you'll find is fascinating is, we're talking about the spinal column right here. And what is the best magic wand that exists for human? Right. So
the 33 bones of the spine.
That's right. 33.
Yep.
So were they preserving their dead relatives' magic wand? Were they preserving? Were these people aware of that? Oh yeah. That's what I said.
That's the first thing that jumped into my mind when Timothy showed when you showed the picture and Timothy was saying it. That's a magic wand that somehow was using you. Did those bones belong to some kind of like elders that had powers or something? I mean, That's pretty wild looking things to how you look at it. And the spine, like you said, like we always think like the seat of consciousness is in the heart or in the brain usually. Well, the brain is like is like the amplifier and the processor. You're not going to get anything out until you have send it through the antenna, and the antenna is the nervous system through the spinal column, and that's the Mac Daddy of the whole thing. That's really what the charisma and everything else like that, and all your psychic powers is really rooted in your spinal column. And the spinal column is interesting. At the very base of it contains a fluid that's very similar to semen in both male and females. And that's also kind of strange as well. But yeah, I think that's what, you first look at that and think, oh, so you see, this is the thing we look at that, the Western viewpoint would look at that and say, that's pretty gruesome or it's pretty cool looking. And it would never actually dawn on them that was actually kind of a way of amplifying a magical wand. Because maybe those people knew there was something in the actual vertebrae that we've kind of, we don't know about. I mean, if you ever held a vertebrae and look at it close up, it's really strange. It's an odd looking thing. It has like kind of like these porous holes on the bottom and top. And it's just a very interesting shape, the whole shape of the thing. It looks very mechanical and machine-like. So it's obviously evolution has put an awful lot of work into keeping making the vertebrae very interesting and very look at a snake. A snake is nothing but a vertebrae. It's thrown away everything else and just kept the spinal column. Doesn't and they're the ultimate predators in the dark and using infrared and all this kind of thing to hunt. So there you go. I mean, they've reduced their magical process serpents down to just the spine. So maybe there was, I'd be interested to know if a serpent, if that was actually originally a serpent cult. I'd like to know that too as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about serpents because serpents represent pure power. So they're nothing else but that. Yeah.
But no, I just think that's so cool. And Thomas, that fluid that you're talking about, that's almost seminal, that exists within the base of the spine. And sometimes I wonder in Book of the Law and some of Crowley's other writings, when he speaks of blood, yeah, obviously there's that correlation where if you translated it could be semen, because back then you could write about death and blood and everything, but you couldn't write about sex and bodily fluids in that era. So there are those people out there who will say that no, when Crowley is speaking of this and that, of blood and sacrifice, he's actually talking about semen and masturbation or sex. Yeah. And I just wonder too, well, maybe going one layer deeper beyond that, is he talking about, is it the synovial fluid? No. What is it? Cerebral spinal fluid? Is that what you're referring to? That
at the bottom,
kind of a kundalini.
It kind of falls down to into a kind of a sexual fluid at the bottom. About 4 years ago, I got on the wrong side of this magical group down the southwest of Ireland, and the guy who ran it actually hexed me, and I was waking up with this sense of something in my lower spine. There was something in there, and it planted some kind of force or power into my bottom lower spine, which eventually came out of all places in Wielisburg Castle, well afterwards in Germany. And I could feel it down there. I could feel there was something like in my ass just below my spine, and it didn't feel right. And I was wondering if I had something. It wasn't sexual or anything like that, so I was smiling too many. I wasn't being ass shagged by Beelzebub or anything like that. It was more like a force. It was more like a force.
I'm not mature.
No, you're right though. No, I was. Well, that's you're right. No, you're right to laugh at it, but it didn't feel like that. But it was definitely down there. And
I'm not laughing at you. I'm not laughing at you.
no, you can laugh at me because I'm kind of laughing at it now too as well. Because but it was kind of weird. But that's why you have the lower base chakras down there, because that's where the demonic entities and so on can nester. And that's why, as you process yourself through Vedic spiritual traditions, you move from the lower spine up to the top of the crown chakra. There's a reason for that, because you're better at the top than you are at the bottom. And you think about it, makes sense as well. It's where all the waste in your body comes out and everything. So if you were to actually be possessed or something like that, it probably starts down there somewhere, probably in the part of your body, concerned with the disposal of waste, things like that.
Yeah. And it's your grounding center too, so if you fuck somebody up at their foundational level, that's really the best place to try and attack somebody. Yeah. Because I imagine somebody like you, or maybe even most people, but definitely somebody like you trying to attack you mentally would probably be pretty futile. You're too smart for that shit. So you gotta hit somebody where they're not thinking about it, but it affects, it's like your adrenal glands. If you fuck up your adrenal glands, every other hormone system in your body's fucked.
Yeah.
You won't sleep. You won't eat.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a lot of truth to that. That's why I think you get a lot of psychopathic types will go for you emotionally. They will try to do something to damage your the people you love and stuff like that, and things like that, or your pets and stuff. They'll do things like that, your children, they'll try to hurt you that way. And that's like the lowest level of all. And where you think that lowest body, even if those bombs that they had, lots of wars, that like landmines. I think a lot of how they work is they blow the bottom of the spinal cord out, and all the spinal cord fluid drains out of the person and they die. Because if you lose your spinal cord fluid, you die. Here's another thing I was thinking of weird. This is a weird one. Let's talk about this one for just a split second. All my life, I was surrounded by people that had bad back problems, and I very rarely hear of anybody having a back problem anymore. Like, it would seem to be very common. Are we doing that physical work? I don't know. But even people who worked in offices, I remember it was back in the 80s and early 90s, a big thing with these orthopedic chairs at offices and stuff, and to help your back and your posture. And chiropractors were all the rage. Everyone seemed to be going to a fucking chiropractor. Now I've noticed that that's actually stopped. You hardly ever meet people with back problems anymore. That's a diversion. I know I digress, but I just thought that was a weird thing the other day. I rarely meet anyone anymore that has back problems.
I meet them all the time. I am one of them because of the job that I do. We are fucked up. We're always going to chiropractors and masseuses and shit.
But that's the childbirth thing caused that.
No, it's just the nature of the job. It's very physically hard. You have to stand in a lot. You know what I mean? Like your shoulders are up all day and shit like that. But no, what you're saying is right.
Used to be everybody at one time. Everybody I knew was literally had a back problem, and it was constant. And it just doesn't seem to exist. And even people I know that suffered from back problems in the past, years ago, they don't have them anymore. Just
somebody in the comments. Somebody in the comments asked what would be the spiritual implications of having some sort of spinal surgery. If you have to have, pins or something put into your spine.
No problem at all. I wouldn't worry about it. Yeah. You never know. And actually, it's because the actual process is the central part of the vertebrae where the nerves run down, and the pins just go into the bones. So yeah, completely harmless.
Yeah, I was going to say with that too. It's just the physical spine itself is just a physical manifestation of a part of your energetic. Right, as long as it's intact, and it's part of something that's energetic there anyway. The spinal column itself is just a physical distillation of that, something that's already energetic. I would imagine it's not going to affect one way or the other. It's not going to make someone more magical or less magical, or have more magical ability or less magical ability, because that like you're saying, Thomas, is as long as the nerves are going through that pathway, it's fine. And if you sever that pathway, someone's dead anyway. But and it just reminds me that this whole thing with Kundalini, with the twin snakes going up and around the spinal column, and just that idea that activating whatever force that is at the base of the spine that's inherently there, and it'll come up with cerebral spinal fluid, I think, or no, the other one, synovial. Yeah, either one of those will go up the back, and it just, again, a Crowley quote when he talks about magic being stored in the butt. I wonder if this is what he's talking about too.
Yeah, well, you think about it, if you're developing your magical state, you're basically coming from like where does a seed grow? A seed grows in the mud, in the dirt, in the soil, right? In the dead matter of the earth. So where does your spiritual power grow? In the lower parts of your body where the waste is processed. You are a flower.
Right. You got to get into your own bullshit sometimes to grow out of it. Got to be willing to face your own bullshit. But no, this is a real fascinating story. I think absolutely they were saving these, whether they were relatives' spines or they were some sort of priest class or.
Well, did you ever see Crowley's death card? It's a skeleton at the bottom, it's at the bottom of the ocean, moving up the dead matter to the surface to bring new life to it, and it looks like sort of like geometric vertebrae going up. That's what we're talking about. Go and have a look at Crowley's. Maybe you can pop it in here for the final video. Not even now, but for the final video, so people can have a look at that. The death card in the top deck is bang on. Exactly what we're talking about right here.
Yeah, really cool colors in that card too. That kind of the greens and blacks in it. Yeah,
and the skeleton is kind of AI, robotic. It looks a bit like Terminator or something.
Yeah. No. So, shall we go on to the next one? Again, keeping this thread going between this.
Okay. Inside the UK lab that connects brains to quantum computers. In a room at the United Kingdom's University of Plymouth, a PhD student is sitting at a computer, eyes closed as if he's meditating. On his head is what looks like a black swimming cap, but it is actually an electroencephalogram reader that's sensing the electrical activity passing over his scalp. In front of him on the monitor, there's an image of a wireframe globe with 2 points marked 1 and 0. In the center of the globe, like a clock with a single hand, is an arrow that oscillates between the 2 points. As the student changes his expression from one of relaxation to one of wide-eyed agitation, the arrow twitches and moves. Every several seconds, he enters a new digit. It might not look like much, and right now it's still very early days for this work, but it's nonetheless fascinating stuff. As the student changes his brain patterns from calm to energized and back again, he produces alpha and beta waves that are then used to manipulate simulated qubits, the elemental unit in quantum computing, reflecting the math of quantum physics, using nothing more than the power of thought. If you train yourself to produce these two kinds of waves, then you can send some sort of Morse code to the computer. Professor Eduardo Miranda of the University of Plymouth told Digital Trends. The problem is that it takes 8 seconds to generate one command at the moment because the EEG is very slow. We need a lot of processing to analyze it, and this analysis is not so accurate, so we need to keep checking many times to see if the code really is what the person wants to produce. Welcome to the somewhat shaky, tentative steps of the world of quantum programming by way of brain-computer interface. According to its creators, it's the start of construction of what the team calls the quantum brain network. And it's got the potential to do a bunch of things that are worth getting excited about. If you've seen any list of the most exciting technologies currently shimmering on the tech horizon, you've almost certainly come across the terms brain-computer interface, BCI, and quantum computer. A BCI is fancy terminology for a way of controlling a computer using brain signals. While every device with a manual input is technically controlled by the brain, albeit usually via an intermediary like fingers or voice, a BCI makes it possible to send these commands to the outside world without having to first output from the brain to peripheral nerves or muscles. Quantum computers, meanwhile, represent the next big thing in computing. First proposed in the 1980s, although only now starting to become a technical reality, quantum computing refers to a completely new approach to computer architecture. It will not only be far more powerful than existing classical computers, but will also make it possible to achieve things that would be impossible even with millions of today's supercomputers chained together. They could, if you believe their proponents, be the answer to the inevitable end of Moore's law as we know it. However, while BCIs and quantum computers and undoubtedly promising technologies emerging at the same point in history, the question is why bring them together, which is exactly what the consortium of researchers from the UK's University of Plymouth, Spain's University of Valencia, and University of Seville, Germany's Kipu Quantum, and China's Shanghai University are seeking to do. Technologists love nothing more than mashing together promising concepts or technologies in the belief that, when united, they will represent more than the sum of their parts. Sometimes this works gloriously. As the venture capitalist Andrew Chen describes in his book, The Cold Start Problem, Instagram leveraged the emergence of camera-equipped smartphones and simultaneous powerful networks effect of social media to become one of the fastest growing apps in history. Taking two must-have technologies and combining them doesn't always work, though. Apple CEO Tim Cook once quipped, "You can converge a toaster and a refrigerator, but, those things are probably not going to be pleasing to the user." So what makes brain-controlled quantum computing an example of the former, a member of the more than the sum of its part club, and not symptomatic of the toaster fridge problem? In a paper published in early 2022, the aforementioned consortium of researchers write that we foresee the development of highly connected networks of wetware and hardware devices, processing classical and quantum computing systems mediated by brain-computer interfaces and AI. Such networks will involve unconventional computing systems and new modalities of human-machine interaction.
Yep. Again, more bullshit. But this idea, though, that they're talking about being able to do some sort of gate there with a 1 and a 0 by creating alpha and beta waves is what they're saying. It's just such an ineffective gate switch there of either one or the other. And they're so far from their thinking, oh, this means that someone's thoughts are programming. No, it's just you're literally creating physiological reactions inside the body with an alpha wave or a beta wave to do some sort of gate. If yes, then this, if no, then that kind of gate. And that's not computer brain interface. But I think it's interesting, though, that they're putting out all this information out there to make it sound as if we're closer than we are, or as if they're closer than they are to getting this technology. Yeah, to get the money going, to funnel the money in towards them. But it's just, we're so far from that. And I don't think it is entirely, I don't think it's capable. I don't think humankind is capable of doing something where it's thought to digital, because the people who are developing this don't understand what thought is in the first place. They might understand the physiological mappings of the nervous system and the physiological mappings of the brain and neural function, but they don't understand what a thought is. Right. And how that thought interfaces with reality is what Timothy's saying. They just see that, oh, when there's this type of thought, it activates this little pathway in the brain. And they think that somehow that pathway is associated with that thought itself. But no, they're just so far from even understanding what thought is, and that it doesn't originate from in the brain. All these people who are so materialistic, they're thinking that those thoughts originate within the brain. And if they can just put some kind of probe right there, they'll be able to access it. And I'm sure they've tried that and just failed horribly. They get some guy thinking about some random thing and it's switching on all kinds of bullshit. And it's the brain isn't what they think it is. Human consciousness itself is just the act of, the body being awake. It's not us. It's not our thoughts. It's just the nervous system and like Thomas, you're talking about all the time, the brain being a transmitter receiver. It's not the source itself. It's, the source itself is us, and we're not anywhere in the body. We might have a seat to the body somewhere on the pancreas, down here, but we aren't there. You can't do an autopsy and find the human being in the body at all. So.
Yeah. It's just like the first story again, isn't it? This time not space travel, but brain stuff, what consciousness. And again, sci-fi lying to us. I think it was a film back in the early 80s called Brainstorm with Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood. And it was all about they put this kind of head thing on a type of person, and then they could see everything they were thinking and feeling. And it was a way, like a video camera and sensation thing and this kind of stuff. And they're obviously looking for money. That's what that is. They're looking for cash to inject into their research programs. But if it's 2022, if that's as far as they can get, is someone basically blinking a switch on and off. We're hundreds of years away from these real brain interfaces. And again, just like you said, Jason, they don't even know what the consciousness of the brain really is. Not only you've had stories of guys who've been shot in the head in wars, and half their brain wrecked, and they come home perfectly normal because other parts of their neural partitions would take over the missing parts that were destroyed by the bullet. And there was even one individual who they had lived a perfectly healthy, normal life, and just by under a CAT scan one day, they discovered he had no brain, none at all. He basically, spinal column ended in a piece of fat that was hanging inside his cranium. There was no brain in there, and yet he had a perfectly normal, healthy life. Spinal column apparently compensated for the fact that he didn't have neural partitions. So they don't even know what a brain is or how a brain works. Even, I mean, when I was writing my books on psychopaths, I read a lot of stuff on neurology and stuff like that. Terribly interesting. But what I discovered was there's no hard and fast rules about the brain. The brain is a fascinating thing. It's almost like an intelligent organ all by itself, and it will not. No brains are like fingerprints. No two are the same, and they all seem to operate very differently as well. That's why they've never this whole thing of like saying, oh, there's the psychopath in the brain, there's the schizophrenic in the brain, there's the depressed person in the brain. It's nothing to do with that. Your neurobrain chemical electrical process has nothing to do with that. It's an underlying thing to do with consciousness, and consciousness is not inside us. It's exterior to us. And these guys, I mean, that to me that's a laughable project. If that's as far as they've got in 2022, like blinking at a 0 and a 1, and then he even says it's sometimes often it's not accurate or reliable, then they don't even have a research program. What they have is bullshit. That's what they have. And they're trying to fleece money off venture capitalists who think they can live forever. They're going to live forever. Like the Genome Project, another big colossal failure. That you're not, they thought they were going to find where you and your genes, and what they discovered was you're not in your genes, and that's why all that money was. That's why the Genome Project was a complete failure. And the same thing with this stuff. Does that, and also again a warning, don't let anyone. This is why I'm very, I saw that Rich Planet thing this week about the self-replicating circuits inside the needlecraft, and that's building a computer inside you. I don't, that's one of the reasons I'm skeptical about it, because they how would that thing actually interact with your brain? Because you're not in there, you're not in your mind, and that kind of thing. And things like mass transformation psychosis is not caused by affecting the neurology, it's caused by psychology. And psychology is a far more powerful weapon for using on the brain than anything to do with like electronics and things like that. So yeah, that's ironically, that's exactly the same as the first story. They're not going to the stars, and they're not getting into our brains.
Right. And
they'll never admit that. They'll never admit that, because then the money runs out.
Right. And then what's connecting both of those two things, our spine, the real overlooked. Yeah.
The AI thing is not something to really worry about, because the more I read about the AI thing, it's just a huge pipe dream. It's like Mars One. It's just the same thing.
And then it's a misnomer too, calling it artificial intelligence. I think someone said recently that a better term for it is just machine learning technology. It's not intelligence. Intelligence is not the ability to, the intelligence is not the ability to organize data and to move through that data. The intelligence is being able to do something with that. And machine learning is trying to do something with data sets, but it's not intelligence. It's a big database, and
Yeah, this is a result of this soulless scientists, a soulless NPC scientists who don't, here's Bill Gates this week lamenting the fact that the needlecraft didn't work, and herd immunity won in the end. Like I told everyone to start, just hold out, and it worked out just like every other viral problem. Nature solved the problem, and the virus learned to live with us, and we learned to live with the virus. And that's a huge disappointment to them, because they really thought that this was going to be their chance to jump in and play God. This is why they wanted as much as the human race involved, because they could jump in and say, we are now the gods of science. But guess what? Natural law always comes in and says, nah, motherfuckers, no chance.
Yeah, and it's this thing that they keep thinking that they can control humans by physiology or by the brain, and they keep failing miserably because they don't understand what it means to be human. That's what I keep going back to. These people, they don't understand what being human means. They
articles about saying they don't feel alive. Imagine that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they think their wives and kids are just DNA repository in banks for storage of their DNA, and that's all it means to them. That's why women, if you're married to one of these guys, get rid of them. Because he'll never love you, he'll never love your kids. He just sees you as a deposit of DNA source. And I mean, that's why they all have they all have high suicide rates and everything. It's because their lives have no meaning. And the reason why magic works, and all the best science is magic anyway, because science and magic are the same thing at the end of the day, is because it's rooted in the actual non-material world, which is ironically, which is where quantum computing is operating. And that's another thing. That's a whole other kettle of fish for another time. How does quantum computing work? They throw off a whole bunch of calculations into nowhere, and it comes back solved. So who's solving it on the other side? Who's solving it over there? Who exactly is the great? Who has the abacus and who has the quantum abacus on the other side with the pointed fingers going? My God, if you can't, that's completely out. Outside science. So, it's like the placebo thing. They say, oh, well, so the placebo is magical. Oh, no. But the placebo effect is real. Oh, yes. But therefore, it's a magical thing that someone could cure themselves of cancer when they've given them a drug that's made of sugar. Oh, no, not at all. It's the same thing as again. Quantum computer comes from the same mentality. Yeah.
The irony really is that the real quantum computer is the brain. We can't interface with that other world over there and precipitate things and call, find an answer to a problem or something. We don't need a fucking quantum computer to do it. We have one. We all have one.
The envy that Hal had for Dave when Dave was able to do sketches of the inside of this and do art is the same envy that these materialistic scientism types have for, nut jobs like us. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and they can spend all their money and all their time doing all this bullshit, and we're just kind of sitting back laughing. Like, we've been doing this shit for fucking years, lifetimes. Like, y'all are way behind. The fuck are you doing?
Yeah, and they know, and that's why they're always very angry and hostile. Well, we don't give a shit. Yeah.
No, we don't give a shit. I could not be more unmoved by any of that.
Yeah, therefore, psychology is the ultimate arbiter of how a brain is doing more than anything else, because you can get into that brain without even opening it up. And that's what this, the mass hysteria of the last 2 years was all about. And this is why they've taken it as far as it can go. And the only place beyond that is technology. And hence why Bill Gates was lamenting the failure of the needlecraft, because natural law won in the end. And what do people who work in art, magic, philosophies, true spirituality, all abide by natural law?
Natural law. That's right. That's right. And we all have that on our side. So just keep that in mind at all times. You ready for the psychic weather?
Yeah.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The week in psychic weather.
Well, hello and welcome to the current psychic weather, which is a little bit more positive than last week's very dark one. And I'm your tough daddy. I'm not, it's tough love. If things are bad, you have to be told. If things are good, it's the same thing. This week, the force of darkness is still very much on the march. They're very much, this demon-haunted world is particularly demon-haunted at the moment. However, we're finally getting guidance from the dream oracles. I am getting so many messages and reading so many things online about people having very profound cryptic dreams, very realistic and very powerful dreams. When this is happening, this is guidance is coming. This is almost like a tactical somniotic philosophy that develops that allows people to transfer themselves out of the non-material world, at the topic of the show, and into the practical world. We're getting guidance from below. When I say below, I mean the subconscious world, the lower poles of cognition. Now, this if you're having powerful dreams at the moment, or having very strong cryptic dreams, don't make any sense, it doesn't matter. See, what happens is your brain and your subconscious mind are communicating in a language that you may not particularly be wary of, because they originate from a time that comes from long before the development of language and even writing and petroglyphs or anything like that. So they communicate very much in allegory and symbolism. Allegory, symbolism, metaphor is the actual operating system and the linguistic key to the soul and to the subconscious mind. It dreams itself into you, and you dream yourself into it. Between two, a conversation appears that allows you to navigate the material world. So what I'll say is things are still pretty dark. All you have to do is look at what's going on in certain countries at the moment, and there's a nastiness out there, and but there's also great confusion among the leadership. You can see that there's a great sense of confusion, despondency. They have lost, I wouldn't say they've lost control, but that they've been rattled. Now, there's now a battle between us and us who exist within natural law and the profane who basically run the world at the moment, of who's going to get to the finish line in terms of an actual solution. Our subconscious minds through the dream oracles is doing that for us right now. That's our equivalent of all these experts and all these other spin doctors and so on, trying to whip up the next mass formation psychosis. Those of us who are in the tribe and people like us, and many ordinary normal people as well, are having these dreams at the moment for the same reason. We're getting the roadmap to get out of this and get away from them before they can actually develop their next scam and so on. So that's it at the moment. It's still, we're not living in Disneyland. We're not living in Happy Fun Land. It's not the Waltons anymore, but it's solutions are on the way. And this is why it's a good time now to avoid alcohol, avoid any kind of mind-altering substances, stay away from entheogens even, and just allow the dream oracle to do its thing, to communicate with your subconscious mind, and you will get through this fine. So, red flags still up, literally and figuratively, and but the dream oracle is moving into action. So tactical, somnotic guidance would be this week's psychic weather. Thank you.
Is it bad? Is it great? Are you happy? Are you irate? The weekend psychic weather.
Thank you. That was brilliant, as always, and poignant, right on time. I had a dream, Thomas, I shared it with you. I'm not going to go all the way into it because it's kind of graphic, but I had a dream a couple weeks ago. Huh? Not like that. Who's the 12-year-old now? But it was a dream about sacrifice. And in that dream, there were sort of like the watchers and the overlords. And they knew this thing that I was going to do. And it was something that I shouldn't do, because if I did it, there would be no more control that certain emotional or mental states would have over me anymore. And so I feel like that's just really important for all of us, is the reintegration process and sitting in your emotional centers, and really, melding the mental and the emotional, through the column of your spine.
I got loads of messages from tribe members this week, and funny enough, all women, by the way, very similar. This kind of like the battle of the ages expressed as the battle within me. That was kind of like the theme. And that's the same thing. It's like, that's the kind of guidance, the tactical oracle, the dream. Yeah, bang on what you just said. Like, gosh, even one lady this morning, one of my Facebook friends sent me a very similar concept as yourself. So it seems to be the ladies are ahead of the curve on this one. They seem to have jumped ahead of the curve on this one. So the fellas will catch up, I'm sure, in time. Well, that's interesting. Now I want to know why, this will be something probably for next week, why the women are taking the lead on this one. This is important. That's important.
It's also just, I want to say something, Thomas, you briefly said in there, the thing about letting something from below come up, and it's just like what you're talking about earlier about there being that sacred power at the base of the spine. And it's like, yeah, it's absolutely from something below right now coming up from that kind of root energy. And I just wonder, with what you're just saying there about the women kind of being the ones on the forefront of this, I was talking to Jade about this recently too, that it seems like right now is the opportunity for men to kind of be stepping back into the divine masculine kind of thing. And perhaps with that, it's allowing kind of the women to be the oracle again, where it's like the women might be the ones coming up with solutions right now, and the men might be the ones being able to tactically implement those solutions. Where, we've gone past an era of diplomacy that was there since the late 1940s on, and now we're going into a different era again with 2020 and beyond, where perhaps the women have become the oracle again.
Go ahead.
I have just mixed feelings about that kind of thing. I don't buy this whole thing of sacred feminine, sacred female. Not sacred, that's a lot of hippie stuff that came out of the 60s and things like that. By a lot of came out of Wiccan movement. No, I'm not saying it's not
I think
true.
I misspoke. I misspoke with that word. I meant just like the healthy masculinity, not bitch masculinity, alpha masculinity again. I used the wrong term. Fuck divine, just say, real masculinity.
Yeah, but you see, because of sort of the infiltration of the spiritual concept from the Abrahamic thing on, what people don't understand today is that you could be a man on a battlefield plunging a dagger into another motherfucker's neck, and his fucking blood, and he's screaming for his life. And you're just as spiritual and in touch with your body and in touch with your spirituality as just any fucker in a monastery going,
Right,
this is
that's
the
what
thing.
I'm saying. Yeah.
It's always pissed me off. Is that this whole thing that that there's only a certain kind of stereotype represents the spiritual idealism in man. A warrior, and we know that all pagan societies, was considered the most spirit, from Cuchulainn to the ninjas, to the samurai, you name it, to the Maasai of Africa. They were always the berserkers of the Nordic world, always considered the most spiritual element, because they saw life in its fullness and rawness. And when they were fucking sending a fucking axe through a guy's head, that's about as deep an insight to the nature of existence as you're ever going to get. It's just that in the modern age, because they deliveries, and in the Abrahamic Lord, the Prince of Peace, and all this fucking...
That's not what I'm talking about. Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about you, Jason, or Jade. I'm talking about in general. In general, this is just me going off my fucking ranting. But it's like the whole thing comes from this, love thy neighbor, love thy brother, give peace a chance. The world,
right.
Part of natural law has also been expressed in violence. And if you don't believe me, show me an animal that isn't in danger of being eaten by another animal. That's just how it is. But that doesn't detach from spirituality. What Jade is saying, I totally get. But it can be also, when I hear this stuff, it's time for the sacred. No, sorry, I was born a sacred masculine.
That's what I mean, Thomas. That's what I'm saying. This was me to Jade, so I'm correcting. This is not Jade to me. This is me to Jade.
I'm not starting a fight. I'm just saying,
I got to defend what I'm saying, because I've been doing this a lot. I've been misusing my words, and I don't mean the fucking sacred masculine as in like love thy neighbor and and all that bullshit. I mean the sacred masculine as that very thing, Thomas, of the man that is willing to do those things. That's what I mean as the divine masculine, not the fucking beta bullshit, not any of that. But
I know you did, but I'm just, the show might go out there and people might start thinking when they hear those kinds of terms, look, I know that I've got a huge amount of followers in the US Marines and US military, and these are all hard-ass fellas. But
right, that's the sacred masculine, the divine masculine, was what I'm talking about.
They're deeply spiritual guys.
Right.
In their own way, and that's something that doesn't get, since the hippie days, that has not been fully respected. Aragorn in Lord of the Rings carried a sword, but he was an almost like he was this embodiment of the spirit. And
fuck you, Lamar, for saying turn the other cheek.
And that's why. Why do you think those Mexican gangs like MK13, people, they're deep, they're all involved in the occult and everything. And people say, oh, that's all dark magic. It is dark magic, but it's magic. It's dark occult. It is. Define, be spirit. When someone says be spiritual, define spirituality, motherfucker, because it's a big ass spectrum. And it goes all the way from warfare to meditation and everything in between.
Right. So that word divine, or that word sacred, maybe was a misnomer to use for this. I should say maybe perhaps the true masculine, or just the masculine. But you get what I'm saying, Thomas?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
That right now, that's the reason why perhaps maybe the female are becoming the oracle again, so that the men can go out there and do the shit that the female. Right, so that the women can go back into that place again and not be the ones having to be, because it's like the 20th century, things got incredibly unbalanced between male and female energy, with the woman thinking that she needs to become an alpha man, right? So it's time for the man to be able to step back into that role in general in the society. There's all kinds of opportunities out there right now, whether it's what's going on politically up in Canada and all of that, but there's all this opportunity for men to become men again, and that's what I was talking about. So the divine, I'll edit that word out or something, or maybe just people need to see this discourse. Just leave it. Okay.
No. You use the right language. It wasn't you or Jade I'm talking about. I'm talking about people might hear this and misunderstand it. You look at the icon of Joan of Arc, right? Now, she's always dressed as a warrior leading the French army against the English. But Joan of Arc probably didn't take part in the battles. What she represented was a spiritual force on the battlefield. that inspired the French troops. And but like we've twisted that around. Well, it was the Bolsheviks who really did that. They took women. There's a very interesting book I read once about the history of female soldiers in the Red Army, and they tried to portray us like the women went out there with machine guns and they killed just like the men. It was a catastrophe. It was just a classic communist mistake, bullshit thing. They sent them out to World War One, the very final months of World War One, and the women cried, the women freaked out, they ran away, they were raped by both their own troops and foreign troops. It turned out to be a catastrophe. The Bolsheviks all played it all down. There's like, women that can fight a lot, and that's why you don't send women into battle. You don't. You can send them into battle as shield maidens. And that's another bullshit thing. The shield maiden wasn't at the front waving a sword. The shield maiden was a spiritual, guiding, healing, medic force behind it. She was the shield of the man, the shield of the tribe. She didn't actually get out there like stupid shows like Vikings where she's chopping fellas' heads off. That stuff was all nonsense. And this is like, people say, it's incredibly sexist. It's not. No society in history has ever put their women in the front line of battle. Why? Because if the wombs are gone, that's the end of the tribe. Simple as that. Simple yep. Logic. No, but yeah, I know what you mean. And the women, what Jade is saying there about the women moving over, we have to be equal. If there's one place that men and women are equal, it's in the spirit. And a lot of this divine masculine, divine feminine, I'm not arguing with you, but a lot of that comes from the Wiccan stuff, the kind of thing that like we're so separate, go off into our different places. And that's ultimately Abrahamic. Stick the bitches in the convent and the men can do into the church and this kind of thing. Like in Judaism, the men and the women are on different sides of the church, of the synagogue. In Orthodox Judaism. In Catholicism, that used to be the same as well. In Islam, the women aren't even allowed into the mosque. And so that division comes from Abrahamic thing. If you had went back to the time of the Druids, the time of the Hellenic pagans, male and female priests and priestess were all there.
Like the Golden Dawn.
One place where equals is in the spirit.
Yeah. And it's like what they did with the Stella Matutina and the Golden Dawn back in the 19th century, where it was a Freemasonic order that where women and men had equal roles within that society. Yeah.
It was female.
Okay, yeah. It
was female druids and male druids. No one talked about male and female sacredness. They were just druids.
And I think there's a really great example to think about too, when men and women unite to become warriors or whatever they need to do to defend the tribe. What you guys are saying with, women being the oracle is we're not better at it than men are, but just women are just naturally more receptive. So it's just the nature of it. So we can go into it like a dream world or a dream work.
And intuition, women have phenomenal intuition compared to men. Men are
right. So we can go into those places and pull out information, but the men are really the ones that can execute it. So that's that perfect symbiosis of like retrieving and then action.
Compatibility. It's compatibility. That's what it is. But, and this is going to sound terribly annoying to some people, but even your spirit, your soul is male or female. And that's why you come back as a man and you come back as a woman. The Druids even discovered that. You always come back as the same gender. So I know that's probably I'm not going to get the JK or Potter treatment for that one, but sorry, it just is. There's something so powerful about the duality of male and female that's the real sacredness. The real sacredness is the actual difference between male and female. That is the real power.
Yep, and how they're complementary, and you can be invincible that way.
Yeah. And although men have a little bit of a woman in them and women have a little bit of a man in them, that's what, look, the yin and yang shape is a beautiful expression of it. There's a little bit of the tail goes into the white of the black and a little bit of the white tail goes into the black. They're not solid, a circle cut in half. It's a slight wrap around. And that's the yin and yang singles is a beautiful expression of that, of how that's done. And that's I'm not going to say anything, but I saw a video recently by a researcher or whatever going on about toxic sacred femininity, and it was just basically the biggest load of bullshit you ever heard. It's just like, that somehow the problems that men have with women is caused by the fact that women have a toxic soul. Is basically what this guy was saying, and it's just pure bullshit. It was just pure bullshit. And
what does that say about his femininity?
Well, it's just like men going their own way, taking the spirit world. That's what it was like. If you look at, the damage that has been done to us by Abraham and the Abrahamic stuff has just been colossal. And that's why ever since the 1960s, all we've been trying to do as a species is try and repair that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that thing that I talked about several weeks back when I was putting my kid to bed. And, he basically, to sum it up, he was like, people think that I'm a tough guy and I can be a tough guy, but like, I also am really sensitive and I have feelings and shit. And I was like, all the real men do it. You have both.
Just back to that guy on the battlefield that cuts the guy's head off. He still loves his wife and kids. I mean, I often think in Lord of the Rings, that scene where Faramir rolls over the guy who was killed on the elephant and he's lying on the ground and he says to Frodo, you think his convictions were any less than yours? Showing the depth of Faramir as a warrior. Now here was Faramir just killed the guy. We rolled him over and says, do you think his convictions are any less than yours? And that was that was the wisdom of the warrior right there. And that's how a man is supposed to be. He do it, but he doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to be cold or vicious about it.
Yeah, they're still very consciously aware that person was alive.
Yeah,
but it's just a thing that has to be done.
Yeah, but it's just the gods have put him in that position, and one came out alive. That's basically what it is.
That's nature. It can be cold and impersonal, but it's nature, and we're a part of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, that was really good. We all got a little fired up. That was awesome.
No, but it was fired up, not at each other. It was fired up for clarity.
Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah. Just
I would have known the comments would have lit up with all people saying, "Oh, look, I don't want any hippies to come into this show." That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Hippies, you're not welcome. You're not welcome here, hippies.
Get out. Go on now. Get.
That's the old punk in me coming out.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Supernatural noise. Unusual trumpet sounds continue all over the world, and they have reached a whole new tone scale. In recent years, thousands of people in different countries have witnessed an inexplicable sound phenomenon. Loud sounds of unknown origin are heard from the sky around the world. Strange sounds from the sky are compared with a roar, a hum, a creak of metal, the noise of a jet engine, a high-speed train, giant speakers from which the sky phonates. Unusual, very low sounds have been recorded by many people in different parts of the world since the summer of 2011. Most people call them the sounds of the apocalypse. Since March 2020, many strange events in the world that occupied the minds of conspiracy theorists somehow faded into the background because people were constantly drilled by the thought of something else. However, these strange, sometimes scary sounds from the sky not only increase in frequency, but also have gone into an utterly new tonal scale. As it turned out, during the pandemic, much has changed in these sounds. The frequency of observations has increased. The very nature of the tones has changed. Thus, some of the new sounds resemble the sounds of opening some hellish gates or the roar of animals kept in this hell. With what these changes are connected, one can only build theories. Some are inclined to mystify these sounds, which allegedly testify to the approach of the Day of Judgment. According to geophysicists, the causes that generate these waves can be located both in the core of the Earth and on the sun. Scientists believe that the source of such powerful and large-scale manifestations of acoustic gravity waves should be very large-scale energy processes. Powerful solar flares and the gigantic energy flows generated by them, rushing to the Earth's surface and destabilizing the magnetosphere, ionosphere, and upper atmosphere, can be attributed to such processes. So the consequences of powerful solar flares, the impact of shock waves in the solar wind, the flow of corpuscles, and bursts of electromagnetic radiation are the main reasons for the emergence of acoustic gravity waves caused by an increase in solar activity. The reason for the sky rumble may also lie in the core of the Earth. The activation of energy processes in the Earth's core can modulate the geomagnetic field, which, through a chain of physical processes at the level of the ionosphere, atmosphere boundary, generates acoustic gravity waves, the audible range of which is recorded by people in the form of a frightening low-frequency sound in different parts of our planet.
Yeah, this is real. I
Weird shit.
15 years ago.
We were kind of bouncing around this idea yesterday. It kind of like the thought was born yesterday, and we've been mulling it over ever since then. So it's still a baby thought, but we were talking about the idea of, there's 12 notes in a musical scale. And so that represents, a wavelength of reality. And when you get to the 13th step, it's unstable and it's disharmonic, but you have to take that step in order to get to the next octave. But what happens to a lot of people at that 13th step is because it's disharmonic. I think that's why 13 is often considered an unlucky number, and people often die, places that have 13 floors or something like that, people die there all the time. And it's just this weird, time out of space or space out of time where it's necessary. You have to go through it, but you really can't stay there for too long. And so I think that maybe what's going on with these sounds and how they've said that the tones have changed is, especially with the last 2 years, we're entering that new octave, but there's this step that we're at right now. And I think we're almost past it. I think a lot of us are past it, but as a collective, I think we're still kind of stuck on this 13th step. That's very dangerous. And a lot of people are not going to make it through that. It's very uncomfortable. It feels wrong. It feels unnatural, even though it is, it's a necessary thing. But so I think that maybe what's happening with these sounds is it's the shifting over from the one reality to the next, or the octave that we've been on for a long time to the next. And we just have to push through that 13th step.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. You look at those cymatics things and where they play sounds at different frequencies in the sound and how it changes and stuff like that. And I've heard that sound from the sky about 12 years ago. I used to do this mad shit, like walk. There's a big, huge bog near where I live, and I used to walk across it at night, pitch black with a flashlight. And bogs are very dangerous places, but there was a farmer's track across it, so I knew roughly where it was. And my hope was to invoke something something supernatural and spiritual by putting me in this bog at night in complete blackness, walking for a couple of miles. Nothing ever happened at the time I was doing it, except that noise happened once, and it definitely came from space. It definitely came from the sky. It was a very low frequency hum, and my first thought was there's about 1.5 miles away a milking shed belonging to a farmer. And I went over a guy called John, and I said, "Did you switch on the cow's milking machine last night?" And he said, said no. And he said, "It wouldn't have made that kind of noise anyway." So that I actually heard that noise, and it definitely came from space, the music of the spheres. So Timothy, yeah, I think you're down with something like that. That somehow, just like the cymatics affects the sand on a metal sheet when you change the sound frequency, this yoke from space, whatever it is, affects our consciousness. Because it was, I'm not saying I invoked that because nothing happened, although that's the bug later on where I told you the black helicopters appeared. Remember I told you about, I saw black helicopters flying over a bog in the strangest way, but that was years later. But that was the only thing that happened, and maybe I was being led out there for that reason to actually catch this thing in full volume. But those noises are real. There's no doubt about it. But it's not, people are not imagining it.
I mean, it both sounds like, if you read, I think it's in Journeys Out of Body by, forgot who it's by, but one of those sounds that occurs when you're slipping out of phase with your body, people will hear like a loud scraping sound, like those, we call them in the U.S. manhole covers, those big iron steel sewer covers, and them scraping across a pavement. There's that terrible like scraping sound, and people have heard things like when there's entities coming in, that terrible scraping sound. So what Timothy's talking about with going above the octave to the 13th semitone, if you're going from C to C on a keyboard, there's 12 semitones, and then that octave above going up to that C sharp, the very next pitch in there, it's like that splitting from the octave into the next reality. There could be like a grinding sound that's audible, maybe not to your physical hearing, but to your inner or your psycho-spiritual hearing, whatever you want to call it, your inner ear, that is perceiving that scraping sound, just like when people are going, like I was talking about the Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of Body by Robert Monroe. I think it's in his book where he talks about that kind of scraping sound. People, yep, thank you, Ian. Yeah, Robert Monroe. Some people roll out of body, like they'll go either to the left or to the right when they're going out. And then sometimes I've had that occur while going in and out of dream states, hearing that, or realities that I'm in while I'm dreaming, that kind of scraping, like a sewer cover manhole kind of sound. So I'm wondering if that's what this is, if it is coming from somewhere, if it's originating from within us, not necessarily something outside of us causing the pressure on our tympanic membranes in our ears. Maybe it's something within us that we're experiencing, and collectively we might all be experiencing it, but it might not be something physical.
That scraping sound. Last year I was on a medication for my asthma, and it actually worked fantastic, but it was causing me to have narcolepsy and dozing off now and again. And I'd be in mid-sentence and I just get to go sleepy and wake up again. And so I had to get off because it wasn't safe. And but I heard that scraping sound when I was once or twice when I was about to nod off, and like a kind of like I said, a sheet of metal being dragged across tarmac or across gravel, just like that. So that was one thing. So that was probably a good thing to get off that medication, because it was obviously affecting something at a very deep level, above and beyond like temporary little bit of narcolepsy. But if you look at the works of, if you read the old astronomy books, the first astronomers, the likes of Tycho Brahe and Copernicus and Kepler, they didn't only write about things like heliocentrism and laws of planetary motion and so on. In all their work, they spoke about this thing called the music of the spheres, and people used to hear music coming from outer space. And this was until the invention of modern technology, people used to hear music from outer space. If you were in a quiet place in the countryside at night, they would hear music coming from space. And I wonder if that's the same thing.
Yeah, maybe then we were just more harmonized with it. We hadn't moved out of that octave yet. So it didn't feel or didn't sound discomforting or whatever, like where now it's just like, fuck, that it feels gross. It's awful. Like, it's that sound of nails on a chalkboard. You just want to get away from it, but we have to go through it. But what you're saying, I think, is really interesting too. And yeah, the music of the spheres and the music of the spheres will exist in every octave. We just have to attenuate to it differently as we move up.
Yeah. But if the sounds are real, and if you hear them, don't be afraid. It's probably something really good for you.
Yeah.
The end of the Abrahamic thing is the end of the world. Gabriel's trumpet, we're finished. It's unfortunate that we have to undo these Abrahamic mind control things that people have put into their heads, the apocalypse and all that stuff.
And it's even with that, it's like that was probably written as a for Kabbalistic mystics, and that was allegory for some sort of personal transformation, not the end of the world as not the end of the world as in the end of Earth, but the end of the reality that you're currently in, that one's currently in, going into the next one, like what Timothy's talking about there is some kind of interpersonal transmutation or interpersonal growth that occurs, where they're not actually talking about end times as far as like the fucking world ending and being judged and all of that, but about the end of a cycle going on to a new one. Like is it the Baktunes? Is that the term for the the Baktun cycle, where they don't literally mean, fire and brimstone and no more earth, but like, no more, just like 2019 into 2020, that was the end of one world. And we're in an entirely new paradigm now. The paradigm has shifted. I
found a blog post. I found an blog post years ago. And it was when the internet was gone. It was on like GeoCities and it doesn't exist anymore or whatever. And it was a guy had reinterpreted. It was fucking fantastic, actually. Had reinterpreted St. John's letters, the apocalypse, as being a grimoire for the creation of wealth, and very similar to ideas very similar to the tarot, in that it goes through all the processes of the destruction of the self in a kind of like a spiritual alchemy, in order to create wealth and prosperity. And the whole thing of the Christians, in the Kabbalistic sense, of course, and the Christians, particularly in the King James version, they completely made up about the end of the world, even though it specifically mentions that it was at the time of Nero, the Emperor Nero. So it was at AD 60 or something like that. It was specifically for that era and had nothing to do with the future. They turned it around and turned it into a kind of like a doom and gloom end time prophecy, which it was nothing of the sort. But I want to go back and read that again from scratch. I'd like to find something in a very old manuscript. To read St. John's letters, and I reckon they would be close to what that guy was saying, because it's more like a magical grimoire of sorts.
Neil's all into this information, right? Or is knowledgeable about it, Neil MacDonald?
Kind of, but I don't think I've never spoken to him about the apocalypse, the St. John stuff in the apocalypse. But yeah, maybe he does know about it. We just haven't talked about it. But yeah, definitely. Well, he did a big years ago. He did a big course in the Western Mysteries. So through some college or something he was in. But we've never spoke about that. I'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah, it's just because it's interesting. Because it's like whoever comes along and takes an existing spiritual technology, they kind of cherry pick what they need out of it, and then create their own overlay on it and use it as a doom and gloom, thou shalt repent kind of thing. And whether they're taking the Old Testament and creating something out of it, it's like this. You can see it throughout history, whether it's in the East or the West. Somebody comes along. Some
Buddhism, especially. Yeah, Buddhism is completely twisted around, and and that's not a bad thing either. You should be able to take a story, a mythology, and twist it into something. I think that's part of it. But you cannot, if you lose track of what the original mythology is saying and conveying on an archetypal level, then it completely becomes profane. So, like, say, like that, the way you could twist the mythology of a nation to actually mean it's genocide, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What a manifest destiny was. A lot of the United States' problems to this day is caused by using a black magic text called Manifest Destiny, which took Abraham Christianity and used it as basically a template to commit genocide of the Native Americans. Now, and the United States has all these problems to this day, from Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. This is all a psychic blowback from Manifest Destiny, which was a disaster for a young nation to actually do. And it's living with the consequences. No matter, and every time it tries to repair it, if we get a black president, we'll solve the problems. It doesn't repair it. And that's all because the Manifest Destiny was a spiritually corrupt document, a spell, a hex that was actually set in motion as a process that was built on the destruction of the Native Americans. And that's why I've been very interested in Native American. I made a video about that today, Native American spirituality. And I think there's a whole new world that has to now go into. Ironically, the correction, the Luciferian correction, if I can use that term, of America as a process, as a story, will happen with the Native Americans doing it and rediscovering what they were before Manifest Destiny. And I don't mean that necessarily getting all our lands back. I'm talking about a spiritual sense. America's final resolution step as its own magical path is the reconciliation of the Native American, the First Nations people. I really do believe that more and more all the time. That's their pagan story.
Well, that's fucking quite a segue into our last story here.
You kidding me? Now I don't know any of these stories right before we do them.
No, this is freestyle. This is organic. This is fucking living psychically. It's how it's done, you guys.
See, this is charisma and living natural law. The magic,
yep.
We all flow together, and even our arguments have a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely, and always done with respect too. Okay, Pluto return. The planetary shift that brought down U.S. empires is hitting soon. Okay, Pluto return is happening in the U.S. for the first time ever. Pluto is known as the planet of creation and destruction, as well as the great revealer. According to astrology, this planet's return, which only happens every 248 years and is historically associated with great change. If you're the type of person who follows the moon calendar, you're up to date with your 2022 horoscope, and an all-around astrology whiz, your mind is about to be blown by a certain little planet's return. Of all the planetary returns, Saturn return is probably the most recognizable. But did you know that countries, just like people, also have planetary returns? Considering the huge length of Pluto's return cycle, a remarkable 240 years, its return is a very notable and important event. On top of this, it's also brought great change to countries throughout history. According to astro.com, a return is when celestial bodies make a complete circuit around the sky and return to the zodiacal position they once occupied. Astrologically, a Pluto return is when the heavenly body returns to the same position in a birth chart where it was when the chart began. It happens around every 248 years, meaning this is the Pluto return in the United States since the country was founded in 1776. Speaking to My Imperfect Life astrologer, Stephanie Campos Powell explained why you need to keep an eye on the news around the state. For many countries, the Pluto return signifies a period of upheaval, radical reassessment, and change. It has marked the end of empires, but also new forms of government and structure. There is no going back to how it once was. Pluto destroys what no longer serves us and creates a new path forward. Numerology fans, especially those who believe in angel numbers, will know the date in question as it happens on February 22nd, 2022, on Tuesday. However, speaking to Bustle astrologer, Astrodom explained America's Pluto return technically started November 26, 2008, when Pluto entered Capricorn, which was when Pluto entered the same sign it was when the U.S. was created on July 4th, 1776. They also pointed out that this was around the time that Barack Obama was elected, whose campaign slogan was change. His slogan was change, and that's what Pluto is all about. The February 22nd, 2022 date marks when Pluto will enter the same exact degree it was on July 4th, 1776, which is 27 degrees Capricorn. So, yeah, I mean,
wow.
That's everything you just said.
I never knew, even though that graphic you used, it looks like one of those Southwest native glyphs you'd see on the rocks in Arizona or New Mexico.
That's where I'm from.
It looks like that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a glyph like that in somewhere in the desert out that way. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea about this. It makes sense that the United States is then kind of like bonded to Pluto because, wow, this is really fascinating stuff. Tomorrow is when it comes back into the fold within the United States. So America will be from tomorrow a very interesting place to look out for. I wonder
13 colonies.
Wow, I wonder will anything happen like that? The thing that always strikes me about Pluto is that when the New Horizons spacecraft went there, they expected to find an icy, crappy world. And they found quite a dynamic planet that looked nothing like what they expected it to be. Pluto's a very dynamic looking planet. Now, who was the one who actually predicted Pluto before it would happen? H.P. Lovecraft, This Planet You Got, was predicted a few years before the actual planet was discovered. Now, if you look at H.P. Lovecraft, both in his stories and in his personal life, he was sort of like the neuroses of the American dark side of manifest destiny. He could be incredibly racist. He could be desperate to hang on to his New England Puritan stuff. At the same time, he wrote these cosmic horror stories connecting America's destiny and space with the kind of like, you can't kind of pay. You see in my film, Liber Providence, which reminds me, I want to say something. Here's a rant. I was thinking about going to the Necronomicon in Providence this year again. And guess what? It's vaccinated only. So,
fuckers.
So I'll never go again after that. But it was a terribly woke thing, and it's just like the One Ring has been taken over by Amazon wokies, and it's no longer the custodian of the Tolkien myth.
Bullshit.
But anyway, he kind of represents that, doesn't he? That kind of torment. That's an amazing story. I did not know about this, and thank you for bringing it up because tomorrow could be very interesting.
Yeah, tomorrow going forward.
And this is where I was going with that whole thing I was talking about earlier. We'll use the term masculine, just the return of the masculine. Is that there's an opportunity now because it's like it's been a very long time since something hasn't been handled with diplomacy. You know, we've gone through nearly a century of everything being handled with diplomacy. And when tyrannical rule arose, or when tyrannical rule was realized back in the 1770s, a group of colonialists rose up against it. And it's like I want to say that I see something like that occurring again. not necessarily here in the United States, but just around the world. That I'm not talking about everybody standing up and doing some bullshit, but we're just starting to see this with the truckers, and we're starting to see this everywhere. That the veil is thinned out. There's no more illusion that that those who are holding power allegedly over people have, and it's just a it's one of those light of Lucifer moments where it's just this flash within. Yeah,
exactly
and
right.
Yeah, the shot heard around the world kind of thing, where it's within, not an actual physical gunshot, but you know, all the honking and all this shit. It's just, you know, there's a good silent majority of people who are in agreement with this, and it's a very small amount of wokies in the coastal countries here in the U.S. or coastal cities around. Yeah, they kind of are like little countries. I actually shouldn't correct my language on that. It's almost like, you know,
Jason, to interrupt you, then, is the honking a microcosmic reflection of the macrocosmic sounds from space?
Right. Yeah, honking. I was gonna say it's very Pan-like too. We were talking about Pan so much last week, and you know, somebody made a flag earlier. Forgot who it was, but a flag with Pan on it. Yeah, Pan. Right. But no, it just, there's this return back to the balanced out masculine of men being willing to be warriors again. You know, and that's all I was trying to say earlier is a stepping back into that, because it's gotten out of control. It's gotten, you know, all the fucking culture that we have here is you know, soyified. Yeah, that's
like I've been ragging a lot on democracy recently. I have no faith in democracy. I don't consider it wonderful or sacred or anything. And someone said, "What would you replace it?" And instantly I said, "A warrior king."
Yep, any day.
A warrior king, you know. How would you know he'd be justice? He'd be, even if he was evil, he'd be more honest than what we have now.
Yep, and if he was bullshit, people would kill him.
Yeah, and when you hear you hear the likes of, you know, you hear constantly now especially from the left wing, and I don't want to get too political on this, screaming, "We must protect democracy." They suddenly love democracy. What they're really saying is globalism. When they say, "Yep, we must protect democracy at all completely," what they're really saying is globalism. That's what they're really saying. And that's what they're really afraid of losing, because they are losing it. But yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, well, I want Aragorn, I want King Arthur, I want, you know, I want Ale, I want a warrior king, I want Arjuna, I don't want the democratic process, firstly, because, well, a democracy is just, as a plebiscite, is just mob rule. It's
mob rule, right?
You know, most people are idiots anyway. And that's why the founding fathers of the US went to extreme limits to stop the vote from being too powerful with the Electoral College and so on, and the Bill of Rights, and also, you know, so that's all bad stuff as well. But these are all greatly spiritual men. Most of them are Freemasons. Most of them didn't like Christianity, and they didn't. At one point, they wanted to abolish Christianity, and even at one point. So that's, you know, didn't George Washington say it was the most ridiculous, or Thomas Jefferson, most ridiculous religion ever created? And I think it was Jefferson, and so on. And you have all these people on the right wing in America saying the founding fathers were all men of the Bible and Christ. No, they were absolutely Freemasons. Not. They were very Freemasons and atheists. And the ones that were Christians would tend to be kind of like Christian mysticists. They would have been kind of more from the Swedenborg end of things. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, bring it on. Let the great correction happen. I mean, it started as I was making videos there about 6 months ago about the cold sword of the North, and we spoke about that here. And you know, the wild hunt of bring it on.
And then we've got this Arctic blast coming into this continent right now, Canada, U.S. This polar vortex that's coming in. I think it started today and will be here tomorrow, Wednesday. So yeah, the cold sword of the North coming in from the Arctic Circle, and maybe kind of I don't know if an Ace of Swords kind of way kind of thing.
And it's coming tomorrow on the Plutonian cycle. Well.
Yeah. So yeah, there's something to that, and it's a balancing again. It's the pendulum went too far one way and it's swinging back towards center again.
Because natural law will always make that correction, and Lucifer will always be there to shine the light on when it's gone too far.
Yeah, and that light is within. You know, it's a flash of light with no pistol. The David Bowie lyric. You know, it's a spark within you. It's not something outside of you. Within all of us, it's a little spark of light within us. So
yeah, that's pretty intense. I'm quite interested by how philosophical the show has turned after the psychic weather tonight. That's very interesting about him. I had no idea about the Plutonian relationship to the United States, and now I'm really going to look deeply into that.
And then again, here's another connection. I'm just seeing like that 33 with the magical spine, the magic wand, and within the United States, it's like we are growing our fucking spine back. Some of the people here, not the United States as a nation as a whole, but the individuals, the people within this country, the people within anywhere right now, they're growing a spine again, because there's been a lot of spinelessness.
Oh yeah, well you see that with the Dr. Malone thing on Joe Rogan. That was just about two men having balls, having a backbone.
Having a backbone and balls. Yeah.
Damn the torpedoes.
Right.
And there's a lot of, and it's not just for America. I mean, America's kind of like a fascinating place because it's kind of like the boiling cauldron of human consciousness. It has been for a long time. So what America's almost like the laboratory of the world in many ways, and it is. That's how I see it. I think a lot of people see it. The outsiders look upon it that way. It makes it endlessly fascinating. The Wild West. Yeah. And even America's mistakes are not mistakes; they're learning processes. But I do, so I love this idea of a kind of a spiritually resurrected America. I just love that idea, with outside the framework of the Abrahamic nonsense, more in line of what the founding fathers had in their own minds, of a secular constitution guided by the creator. Remember, they never said
whoever yours is.
Creator was, and so wow, aren't we lucky to be living in such amazing times?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've taken on our final form for today. Yeah. All of that was great, especially after the psychic weather things really got turned up. And I appreciate all the discourse. I appreciate us pushing boundaries and past each other even sometimes, but always done in respect. That's how we get past that fucking 13th step, right? Like, we can't just sit there. We have to keep pushing and persisting. So exactly. And even your darkest spiritual moments are just as important as your bright ones. I think like the whole thing of like what the Buddhists talk about, a state of Zen, is what they really mean is that you take both as a learning process and you go with them. And I think that's a good way to live. I think in general it's hard. It's fucking hard. Especially for an Irish. It is fucking hard.
For an Irish gobshite like me, it's the most difficult thing in the world, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just a human thing too. We like to be comfortable. We don't like discomfort, but that's, we're above human, the level above human.
Well, no pain, no gain.
Huh?
No pain, no gain. It's like the most,
right. Yeah.
I mean, the most vacuous people are the people who've had easy lives. They're also the most unhappy.
Yeah. We always like to use the allegory of, in that movie Interstellar, there's that planet that never has any events happen to it. And so, it's not, life never evolves on that planet because, you need asteroids and all kinds of events and shit to hit the planet to bring in new things and new experiences. So we always joke around and refer to people whose lives are very tranquil and, there's no events that happen to them and you see it, they never grow. Yeah.
It's the 21st anniversary of my grandmother Phoenix's death today. And the more I find out about her, the more amazing a woman she was. I mean, her husband died when she was young, when left her a load of kids in late 1950s Ireland. And she had to raise them all in basically a poor neighborhood on her own, and she did. And they nearly all turned out to be amazing people. And that was done because the two oldest sons became the proper father of the family and guided them, and I just find, I was just thinking when you said that, was Jason was saying then about the masculinity. There's an example of it where the two boys had to take care of the family after the father, he was killed. And I mean, it's just funny, a picture popped up today, my aunt posted it, and it was like 21 years. Now, I didn't really know her. I only knew her as my nana Phoenix when I was growing up. And then I was kind of a drifter outside the family, and I ran away, kind of in both mentally and other ways, left home early. And so, but like the more I found out about her later on, the more amazing a woman she was. And so, I mean, it's just like, the ancestors thing, you realize how immediate that stuff is to you as well. I mean, you want to talk about sacred feminine? A woman who raised 13 children on her own without a husband. That's sacred feminine in part, and they all grew up healthy and safe. That's the sacred fucking feminine.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that about her. Her name was Phoenix.
Oh, her second name was Phoenix. Her first name was, but like the bird, which is interesting. What does the phoenix do? Rise from the ashes. It's all the phoenixes in the Dublin phone book are all related to each other. There's an unusual family that came out of nowhere. Yeah.
And incredible. Today's the 21st too. Like every Monday in the week of February is a 7-day. So there's the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st.
Wow.
This is, you're saying, her 21st anniversary. But yeah, I've been having a lot of Phoenix symbolism too lately. But that's next week. But yeah, that's a beautiful story, Thomas. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with us again for another almost 2 hours, I think. Yeah, about 2 hours. This is how it's done. We do these things organically. You know, we have a tiny bit of a plan, but it takes on its own life every time. And you guys are a big part of that by showing up and joining and commenting. And it's great. And we really appreciate. Without you guys, I mean, we would still do our bullshit. It's so much better when you guys show up. So thank you all. Thank you, Thomas.
Bye. See you, Timothy. See you, Jason.
Yeah.
Thanks for a fantastic show tonight.
You too. Thank you.